There's progress on pensions and more casinos may come to Illinois. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. A lot's been going on over at the Capitol and other places in the state. And to discuss that, we have a geographic distribution today. From Quincy, part of the listening area of this show regularly, Bob Gough is here. He is editor of QuincyJournal.com and news director WTAD AM Radio in Quincy. Bob, welcome back.
Good to be here.
Kent Redfield, our numbers expert in so many ways, Professor Emeritus, Political Science, University of Illinois, Springfield. Welcome back to you, Kent.
Good to be here.
Pensions, certainly in the Springfield area and the outer reaches where we have many other government and state employees and teachers. There was a pension plan, and obviously both houses have been talking about this. The governor said at the beginning of this legislative session that using the cartoon character Squeezy the Pension Python as his prop, that the pension crisis is such that it's squeezing all the money out of other programs, and if we don't do something to cut back on long-term costs in the pension plan, the state's in trouble and other programs are in trouble and will have to be cut back. Well, Speaker Madigan came forth with a plan just in the last few days, and the House has passed it this week, 62 to 51. It's not yet certain if that same plan will pass muster in the Senate, but Kent, why, as someone who, with a clear conflict of interest as Professor Emeritus at a state university, your thoughts on kind of what the plan does and if this looks like it might be the solution to the problem this year?
Well, what the plan does is it makes changes in contributions for current employees. It makes changes in COLAs and retirement age for current employees. It reduces cost of living increases for retirees. And so it has a definite effect on what people who are currently working believe their pension benefits would be and what retirees believe their pension benefits would be. So this is a reduction in benefits, there's no question about it. And the Speaker has taken the position, and the bill has 8 pages of doom and gloom to back up that position.
The preamble?
The preamble that we have a crisis, a state of emergency, and that overrides the non-impairment clause in the Constitution.
Which is that the Constitution says you can't reduce pension benefits that have been given to people.
Clear difference between the Senate President who believes that you have to have consideration. You have to have some kind of trade-off. If you're going to reduce my COLA, then there has to be some kind of exchange.
Right. In other words, you can you can get your cost of living adjustment annually, but then not get the health care that you've been getting from the state.
Some kind of.
Yeah, he says you have to make a choice so that it's like a contract instead of a guaranteed right.
Yeah, so clear difference between the House and the Senate, and it's not. And then we've got kind of the negotiation with the unions in the background. And so no one is, is it going to be a standoff between the Speaker and the Senate President? Is this really about getting the unions to the table to get a solution so we don't have to go to court? Or, as the Speaker said, I'm tired of negotiating and we're going to court. So we don't know, but it does move it. We're one more step closer to doing something. We're just not sure what.
In Quincy, of course, we have the Illinois Veterans Home, so we have a large number of state employees, state facility as well, and of course a large school district as well as all the other school districts in the county. Also having a conflict of interest, having a wife who's been a teacher for 20 years, of course.
Everybody's got a
conflict of interest. So, but yeah, something has to be done. The one thing I was very surprised in talking about the schools is that there is no trickle down. There is nothing to the school districts to say you have to start paying into this. Very surprised that didn't happen. I guess Speaker Madigan thought that would certainly be a poison pill, so that was left off the table.
This, of course, is what we've called the cost shift, where many advocates of pension reform say, well, it's not fair that the state or school districts can pay teachers whatever they want, including increases at
Right.
the end of their careers, but all of their pension has to be paid then by the state through the teachers' retirement system.
Right.
That there should be a shift over time to school districts. I think I saw something that said that Speaker Madigan indicated another bill would come out with that, so it would be
Right.
viewed as a separate thing, which may or may not pass, but not part of this big package.
But
Maybe
again,
that
I mean,
allowed it
for him
pass.
to leave it, I mean, there's so much other information, so many other details in this package. I figured he had to leave that one out because I have a feeling that the cost shift is dead on arrival. I mean, I just don't see how there's that legislature gonna be able to vote for that.
The one thing about that is where I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we have so many state employees in and near Springfield that anything about state employees' retirement is big news. Everybody's got their downstate teachers.
Sure.
You know, I mean, because everything outside of what the city of Chicago is paid for by teachers' retirement
Right.
system. And those folks are organized with a couple of very strong unions, and they talk to their legislators. And, you know, if they don't want the cost shift as the ultimate poison pill, maybe that's the reason that
Yeah.
the,
And
the
we're
speaker
only
avoided,
talking.
Speaker Madigan got
Yeah,
rid of that.
and we're only talking about a two vote, you know, it had 2 votes to spare, so, and there were Republican
Right, 'cause
votes
they
on
had
the
60
bill.
to pass, and they got
And
62.
They
right?
got some suburban Republicans on the bill. We should also note that a similar bill, kind of the same concept, in the Senate only got 23 of the 30 votes it needs earlier in the session. Now, a lot of this is posturing, but I think it's a mistake to say, well, the speaker has spoken and now this is just going to roll through the General Assembly. I think it is much more complicated than that.
It always is. One of the things that bothers me, and I guess I think it was a Chicago TV station's report on this, and you know, our pension system is nearly $100 billion in debt. That sounds like it's owed today, but really what we're talking about is the long-term
Sure.
liability of, you know, and it does approach $100 billion, but that's in what do they call that? It's just basically long-term liability
Yeah,
that will have to be paid,
unfunded
unfunded liability that will
liability,
have to
right.
be paid over the next, I guess, in future years.
Sure.
So it's not like that is not owed today. And that sounds scary because it sounds like current pensioners won't get their checks, but that's not going to happen
Right.
at this point. It's just
Yeah,
down there.
that doesn't look likely.
Right.
I mean,
Because the
cer-
systems have billions of dollars, they are paying benefits out of those. It's just that actuarially, they just have to put out less money over time and take in some more, and then, you know, they want to, this plan, I think, would fully fund, you know, in what, is it 40 years or so? It's 30 or 40, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and
So-
it gets, there's a guarantee of saying that we will make the payments. Now, there's all those questions about binding a future General Assembly. There's all those questions about, in a defined benefit system, you know, are your actuarial assumptions correct? Are you going to make the amount of money you think you're going to make?
And will the funds, the funds
Yeah.
already there make it, you know, they have to estimate how much investment income will be just on those collected funds.
So it's, you know, the state is not going broke in the sense that we collect income and sales tax every day. It's a question of where you spend the money. And if this gets to the court, the question will be, you know, do you have a true state of emergency, or have you just made bad choices and now you have to make other choices in order to make up for the bad choices you made? And we, frankly, nobody knows what, you know, 4 members of the state Supreme Court at some point, I think, are going to say something, and you know, but nobody knows what.
Okay. Well, we will. Pension is one of those issues that has just been here all year. The legislative session is supposed to end by the end of May. Under current leadership, it usually ends about on time. Sometimes they don't finish everything, but it looks like it's looking more like there will be something come out of this that passes both houses. We'll see how it goes. Gambling, not yet passed both houses, but I think it was the Senate that approved a revised gambling bill. I believe Senator Terry Link from Waukegan was the lead sponsor again, and if I'm right, it's 5 new casinos, including one in the city of Chicago. They've made some changes in this, some to meet objections that the governor had raised. They want to limit campaign contributions from people who own casinos. They are taking internet gambling out of this because that's how kind of a brave new world that they might not want to get into yet. And the Chicago casino, which I think would have been independent earlier, would now come under the state gaming board. So again, the state needs money. Is this and gambling, objections to gambling continue to be there, but there are also stars in the eyes of legislators always when you talk about new casinos and mayors and Mayor Rahm Emanuel in Chicago said all of the money from the Chicago casino would go to build beautiful, state-of-the-art schools, which is a little reminiscent of people saying the Illinois lottery is going to,
Yes.
fund the common school fund, and then people wonder why taxes still have to go up locally for those. Anyway, does it look like we're going to pass an actual big gambling bill, or will it get loaded down with too much stuff again, as it always does?
No, I think we're going to pass something. I think they have met most of the governor's objections. He has made some noise today about whether or not all of the ethics provision that he would like in it or in it or not. But I think the big things, which were to make the Chicago casino under the gaming board, the prohibition, just an outright prohibition on gambling interests contributing to elections is in there. There's increased enforcement, and so it looks likely. There are two kind of money components to it. One is what you get for selling the licenses, granting the licenses. That's a big one-time infusion of money. And then there's always the question of economics of gambling. And if you put slots at racetracks, which this does, and helps the horse racing industry, if does that dilute the gambling dollar, or are we going to generate more gambling activity? Are we going to pull people back from
clearly
Indiana or
some
not?
Of the, right, but also the other existing riverboats in Illinois.
Yeah.
Because if you can go to a racetrack in Cicero or that area, you might not go to Aurora, or Joliet to go to a boat.
Yeah, so it's not clear this is going to make, this is not going to solve all the state's budget problems in terms of the year-to-year operating expenses of the state. Any revenue at this point helps.
The last time this issue was kicked around 25 years ago, the administration in Quincy at the time sort of said thanks but no thanks, so Quincy was never in the discussion. Matter of fact, a gambling boat was built on the Missouri side of the river in LaGrange, Missouri, which is about 13 miles from Quincy. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it would have been very tough for I think our population in our area to sustain that, having another boat so close by. I think it will be interesting to see how these other boats in these other communities do. If they do thrive, then will perhaps will Quincy or some of these other areas, Springfield, will some of these other areas then say, well, maybe it's our turn, maybe we should do this?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The governor early on rejected ideas from some local legislators. Raymond Poe was one of them, I think, that we should have slot machines at the state fairgrounds, because even though the state now allows slot machines at restaurants and bars all over the state, and probably Quincy and other cities have that, there are some I've noticed in Springfield. The governor said we don't want to, even though they have horse racing that you can bet on at the state fairgrounds, he didn't want to ruin the family atmosphere by putting slot machines there. So that's not in this, just like internet gambling is not in this. So it's odd. Hey, the leaders set the limits, and those fashioning the bill try to work it out. Well, we'll see where it goes if that moves to the next. I wanted to just shift gears a little. It was in the last 3 weeks we've had severe rains, and I know particularly in western and then some farther south along the Mississippi and Illinois, some flooding situation. Bob, just what's the situation with that? Has the state been helpful, and are people getting back to normal at all?
Governor Quinn made a drop-in, as did Congressman Schock, to Quincy. The river hit its fourth highest stage ever at Quincy, but then it receded. The one issue Quincy always has is that the water treatment plant and wastewater facilities are in the floodplain. So those always have to be fortified, it seems like, whenever that happens. But we really ended up being unscathed from this. I know the Illinois River, Beardstown, and some of the other areas had some higher levels, had some of their highest levels on record. But it looks like the worst is over. I know we're supposed to get some more rain this weekend, but it looks like the levels have subsided, and I think the damage is probably going to be minimal.
Yeah, and a lot of damage in the Chicago suburbs, Cook County,
that's right.
DuPage.
Des Plaines, just northwest of Chicago. There were impassable streets for a number of days.
And part of that is where you're building, and part of it is all of that, development, all of the building that we've taken.
Parking lots don't drink water.
Yeah. And so this kind of rain 30 years ago wouldn't have had the same kind of impact. And so we probably, there are issues about how we deal with treat wastewater and rainfall in terms of those highly developed areas. And the suburbs are not getting less developed. I mean,
Interesting.
it could continue to be a problem, particularly if the climate changes in terms of we go through a cycle of wetter springs and stuff.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. In my entire young life in the suburbs, they were building something called Deep Tunnel in Chicago, which was supposed to be this underground system that collects all the water so you wouldn't have flooding problems, and still this new giant, public works project still overflows when it rains so much. So, tough stuff, we move on. Let's get back to money and roads. My friend Tom Kasich over at the Champaign News-Gazette, I think, did the story that something called the Transportation for Illinois Coalition wants a new, different kind of fuel tax that I believe would not be based on per gallon, as it is now, is it 19 cents per gallon? Which means that as cars get more efficient, the state gets less money, and as gas gets more expensive, you're still paying the same per gallon. There might be some changes to try to generate some new money. I'm not sure if that's going to go anywhere this season as we're doing these other giant issues like gambling and pensions, but Bob, your thoughts on, is there a need, or will there just be an overwhelming anti-reaction to the talk of something like this?
Well, I know anytime in the border communities like Quincy, anytime you're talking about anything that raises the Illinois gas tax, it just sends a bigger stream of cars over to Missouri to fuel up, where the difference is roughly 8 to 10 cents a gallon, kind of depending when you cross the bridge from Quincy to West Quincy in Missouri. So all that's going to do is just push more of that. It's the same, the border communities over on the Illinois-Indiana border, it's the same way. So
we always hear that with gasoline and also cigarette
gasoline,
taxes
cigarettes,
and anything.
absolutely.
But in Springfield, people don't,
Right.
if you're going to drive over to Iowa, you're going to use more gas than the
Absolutely.
8 cents a gallon you save. So.
But I mean, I think when you look at and then you go Metro East, I mean, all these areas where people can just cross a bridge and save some money, I really think those kinds of gasoline taxes at this stage of the game are just going to do more harm than good.
Yeah, and it is, the other side of that is we have a huge deficit in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of roads, bridges, things that need to be fixed that we haven't been fixing. Those kinds of jobs are both high, good paying jobs. They also tend to be union jobs, which are a big deal in the state of Illinois. And so there is going to be continued pressure to try and find ways to fund capital projects. And whether this is the answer or not, additional, if you're putting revenue in capital construction, that's a big plus at a number of different levels. And so again, you probably need a new governor with the space to talk about Build Illinois or Illinois First or whatever the big, a big capital program. And we
of
will
course,
get
Governor
to
Quinn, I mean, he did the $31 billion program, a few years ago, which he mentioned was
Illinois
the first in 10 years,
now.
right?
Yeah.
But most of that is, the bonding, most of those projects are already there, so that's always, they always want more.
Yeah, we will get to that because we really have a lot of very bad situations in terms of our infrastructure, but it's not likely until you get, again, a better fiscal situation and a governor who feels like they want a legacy of concrete.
Okay. Speaking of governor, what a perfect transition. Well, in the land of Illinois, as other places, there's perpetual elections. So one of the, just in the last few days, developments is that you mentioned Congressman Aaron Schock had been over to Quincy. He lives in Peoria, and he also represents much of Springfield and Sangamon County. He has toyed, he's only, is it 30?
He's 31.
He's 31. He has toyed with the, and of course he was a school board member at 19 and in the legislature, then in Congress. Toyed with the idea of running for governor. He raises a lot of money and finally said that he had weighed everything and decided that he should run for another term to the U.S. House, which will actually be, I think, his fourth. He was first elected in 2008. So that clears the Republican field by one to Bruce Rauner, a venture capitalist or some kind of money thing from Chicago, Bill Brady, state senator from Bloomington, who was the nominee in 2010 and lost to Quinn in a close race, Kirk Dillard, state senator, from Hinsdale, and State Treasurer Dan Rutherford. Any thoughts on Schock's? Does Schock represent the Quincy area as well?
Yeah, he has all Quincy.
You think it's all just the noble decision that I'm on the House Ways and Means Committee and I can do the best work here?
If it should be. I mean, honestly, you're 31 years old, and why not just ride that for a while? But I mean, Bruce Rauner has a very large checkbook. And then Dan Rutherford already has statewide recognition. And then, of course, on the Democratic side, if Lisa Madigan does step in, you've got to encounter that as well, possibly. So, I mean, I think he made the right call. I think it was the call that should have been made months ago. It's just why do that when you have if not the safest seat in Illinois, you've got one of the safest congressional seats in Illinois, and you're sitting on the House Ways and Means Committee. You can ride that for a lot of more, and you're 31 years old. You can ride that for a long time before you decide, I really want to try something else.
Yeah, and it is a question of kind of how you perceive yourself. Are you a legislator? Do you want to be running things? And certainly we've got situations with Mitch Daniel, who was in the Bush administration in Indiana, and Kasich in Ohio. And there's a certain sense in which it may not be all that much fun to be, it's fun to be powerful, but it may not be less fun to be powerful in Washington, D.C., given kind of the stalemate and the money problems. And so you got people who also being governor is one way to take a shot at being president. And so I think it makes sense for him not to run now, but I wouldn't, 10 years from now, he'll be the ripe old age of 41. And I think he probably does have ambitions about being in executive leadership, and governor is attractive.
Well, we'll see where it goes. There is this kind of an investigation into, did he suggest that one of his colleagues give $25,000 to another campaign when you're only allowed as a congressman to suggest somebody give $5,000. So not a serious violation, but it was something that's still being discussed and not completely finished in the ethics committee in Washington. That doesn't help. I asked him if that had anything to do with this decision. Predictably, he said no. So there we are. Before I forget, because Bob wanted to talk about it, Quincy, there was a milestone in the mayor's race in Quincy.
In April 9th, Quincy elected its first Republican mayor in 28 years. Kyle Moore will be sworn in on Monday at the Quincy City Council meeting. Very big shift there. We had Chuck Schultz was the mayor for 12 years, then John Spring was the mayor for 8 years, and then we had another Democrat.
And those are both Democrats.
Are
they elected as partisan officials there?
Yes, we have partisan elections there. But the interesting thing was Dick Durbin and John Sullivan both dumped thousands of dollars into the John Spring campaign, and then you had Aaron Schock and Dan Rutherford both contribute to and Darren LaHood all contribute directly to the Kyle Moore campaign. So this sort of really extended itself outside of Quincy for all this money to come in, and I think we spent somewhere between $220,000 and $250,000 on a municipal city mayor's election.
Okay. Well, and as I mentioned to you, Springfield races are now way in the $1 million range. And it's interesting because Mike Houston, who was mayor back in the 70s and 80s, and then is in what he said was a single term now, is actually having a fundraiser this last few days. And we're not exactly sure why. He's certainly keeping people guessing a little if he will or will not have his wife change her mind, because he had promised her he would only be a one-term mayor this time out. So we'll see what happens with that, but that race isn't until 2015. You also mentioned Ray LaHood,
Darren LaHood.
Darren LaHood, who is the state senator, son of Ray LaHood, and Ray LaHood has been a Republican in the Obama administration as transportation secretary. There was a press conference this week where I think the mayor of Charlotte was named to replace former Congressman LaHood, who is probably headed back to Peoria. So just a thought there. And in another, and he and the president said wonderfully nice things about each other, as might be expected in that way, and he said he was going out on a high note, which he always wanted to do. So we'll see the next step for Ray LaHood, who also represented part of Springfield, previous to Aaron Schock taking that. And also, and I'm not sure what it means, maybe Kent can comment on this, Penny Pritzker, a businesswoman from Chicago of the Pritzker family that owns Hyatt Hotels, named by President Obama to be the next Commerce Secretary, which is also a position that was held by Bill Daley, the brother of former Mayor Rich Daley. And your thoughts about what effect does that have on Illinois, and do we know anything about Penny Pritzker?
It's always good to have friends in high places. it is a nomination that might not have happened prior to the election because there have been labor issues with the Hilton hotels, and there were certainly some.
That's Hyatt, right?
Hyatt, or I'm sorry,
Okay.
Hyatt. And so there were some questions that were raised when her name was floated initially, but she's been involved with the Chicago Public Schools, a long record of philanthropy, and obviously
Yeah, the
from
family certainly has a lot of money,
yeah.
and they
Oh,
do
yeah,
share some of it. Yes.
and so I think it's not, and it is a little bit of home cooking, and so all of that makes a certain amount of sense.
and she also helped raise $1 gazillion for President Obama too.
Yeah.
So let's not
there
leave
is
that
that.
out.
Yes.
which often is something, has something to do with something. Well, we've only got a couple minutes or less left. There was a conference in Springfield this last week put on by the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute about redistricting. Now, this seems a little esoteric because the next time the census happens is 2020, and the next redistricting will be after that for the 2022 election. But a lot of people think that the Illinois system is very unfair because it tends to give one party total advantage, as in this last time. Even when it's divided here, there's a lottery to change the tie in the commission to give one party basically map drawing ability, and then the other party is shut out for 10 years or has to fight extra hard. Kent, this is the kind of thing I think you've dealt with some. Apparently there is a group called Change Illinois that may do a statewide petition drive for a constitutional amendment to change how we do it. Maybe some sort of outside commission, take the line drawing outside the hands of the legislature. Just any thoughts about if that's a good thing or a bad thing? And
well, I think redistricting is an issue nationally because we've gotten so good at it that whoever is in charge tends to be able to really work it for their advantage, and you create a lot of very safe districts which don't necessarily.
Right. They're not competitive,
Yeah,
and
they don't lend
you don't have
themselves-
to answer to your constituents as
they
much.
don't lend
some
themselves
say.
to compromise and working across the aisle. The tricky thing about in Illinois is if we're going to amend the Constitution through an initiative, we have to use that particular provision in the legislative article that says you have to change the structure
Right.
and the process, which
Right.
is how we got rid of cumulative voting and
Right.
cut the legislature.
And that just means they'll have to raise 300,000 signatures and twice that amount after they get challenged. On that note, that's something to look for in the future. I'd like to thank both my guests, Bob Gough, Kent Redfield, for helping me out today. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.